What's up, guys? This is Kagen, or Kagen, as some people prefer to call me, and I don't really mind. whatever, whatever tickles your fancy, whatever floats your boat. Anyway, I'm here with a tutorial, or my first ever tutorial actually, and I've been requested to show my process behind the wet Neuro base that I utilize quite heavily. I mean, this was basically nobody's gonna be surprised, but heavily influenced by artists such as Cohen Sound, Pulprit, well, Clockwise, Warsaw, all those upscale and people basically. And but I'd like to think that I kind of, whilst trying to copy them, kind of developed my own style and preferences. And anyway, without further ado, this is approximately the sound we're going for. These are some of my songs. Yeah, so take note of that, like bass that kind of sounds, goes in and out, gets filtered in and out, but kind of sounds moist and wet. Some people like to call them wet farts. Yep. Yeah, so behind all these is a lot of work in trying to incorporate it into the song. So like tons of automation and variation. But I'm gonna try to teach you, like show you the basic basic way to do it. And the way I categorize it in my brain is like it's a 3-step process. The first step, we're gonna create a chunky waveform. And the second step is basically modulating and getting movement into that sound. And then the third step is actually mixing it into the song. And the way I handle it is, because I did it so often now, is that after every step I save basically. So I guess I need to show it like this. If I go here and I go into the steady ones, these are basically just chunky waveforms that just hold one steady MIDI note. And all kinds of stuff with white noise. It's very basic. There's not much going on in these. But that's my first step. And I recommend, if you want to use this technique more often, to do it like this, so that you don't want to be doing the whole process every time, because it takes some time. So it's easier to break it up into chunks. And for example, if I want to do a Neuro bass now, I can just grab this one and work from there. And then we have the second step, which I call sessions. I tend to pitch them around and put some more effects and modulations on them, so they sound somewhat like this. Yeah, that's probably more like it. But these are still not done, so that would be the third step. So I wouldn't put them into a song like this, but I would actually, mix them in. And I don't mean simple like mixing in terms of EQ and gain, but like stereo width, filtering, doing glides and matching the pitch and stuff. Maybe substituting the sub bass, stuff like that. But anyway, so for the sake of this tutorial, we're gonna start from scratch. This might be a bit lengthy. At first, if you're quite familiar with how to do a reese, you might want to skip this part, but it's not going to be too long. So I like F, but we can work in E, because why not? So we'll put an E note down. And basically you can do this in any synth, because we're not going to use a synth very much at all, because it's basically a resample process. So we're just gonna, I'm using operator for this, but you might use anything, because we just want a clunky clunky kind of audio wave with tons of harmonics. That's what we're looking for. It needs to be harmonically rich. That's, yeah. Okay, maybe like a filter of some sorts. Put an LFO in the filter. Notch filter. And then if you want, you can like slightly modulate the loudness of the FM operator. Yeah, that's pretty much all we need. You can do this in any synth, like I said. It's not terribly important with what you start out with. And then what I like to do is some kind of EQ modulation. So modulate the frequency. And what we're going for is, and keep this in mind because this is quite important, is you want distorted, harmonically rich, yet, this is very important, clean basses. So what you shouldn't do is distort the shit out of the high end, because then it becomes a mess to work with. And I've done it before, and you can still get something out of the bass with filtering and stuff, but try to not to destroy the highs. The sub I don't care about, because you can always put a different sub underneath, but try not to mess up the high end too much. Another EQ. This is mostly random. You can also just draw some stuff in. Okay, and then I guess you can automate the gain as well. Yeah, that's pretty good. And now with the EQ, I'm going to put this into a thresh, which is a multiband distortion. And what's going to happen is when the EQ like sweeps through the frequency spectrum, inside the multiband compression unit, it's gonna switch from one from one distortion algorithm to another because it switches bands, and that makes it sound very interesting, I think. So yeah, we're gonna work with a lot of movement and a lot of phasing as well. Let's see, for the low end, we might just take like a gentle push. Electric trash for the mids, and like some sort of overdrive for the highs. That's pretty okay. Then notch filters. Okay, I'd like to resample here, just because I like to see my waveform and stuff. It's probably a bit too dynamic. Yeah, you can crush it with like a compressor or whatever. You don't want it to be too dynamic. You want basically a sausage. All right, so some more filtering. I like to use band passes in parallel, and this one I might need to automate a bit more carefully. So I'm just gonna map this to my MIDI controller, and yep, because of the webcam. There you go. Shit, I didn't mean to do that. There you go. Okay, that's one. What I like to also is put band passes in parallel, and then show me this automation, and I'm gonna copy over this automation. Whoops. And turn this into a notch, which means basically we have a bandpass having only those frequencies, and then we have everything else. So right now it's not doing much, but when it turns interesting when you put effects on this, such as OTT and frequency shift, because now basically you're gonna phase at the crossover points, especially if you slightly offset these. Yep, and then I'm gonna just copy paste this and do another bandpass. This is also another technique. And then I'm gonna copy this again, copy the automation to the other filter as well. So now we have two filters doing the same thing. And now what you can do is, first off, we're gonna simplify this envelope. There we go. And now, since you have two bandpasses that are basically having the exact same automation right now, but if you move each and every one of these points, basically ensure that they never run parallel, but they always have different kind of motion. And when you phase them to each other, or like you put effects on them, it just creates a nice sonically rich sound. So I like to do that as well. Just move around the automation. You can also, if you're lazy, this, and this. So this should mean that they don't run parallel. Yeah, I don't like that sound when you have the resonance up and you go into the high frequencies. So I'm just gonna tame those down a bit. Okay, it's not sounding like much. That's because, well, we're filtering off everything. So we're gonna bring it back by some multiband compression. I'm gonna put these on each individual channel. It's a bit too much, so I'm gonna try to keep it fairly clean. Okay. Next step. It's basically filtering, right? Right now we're not doing much. You can put some effects on. Just improvise, you know, phaser might be cool. Chorus. Don't mess up the stereo width too much. Or if you are going to do that, make sure to use to split in frequency bands and just put them on the highs or mids. But I'm going to treat it with care. Disregard my own advice. Yeah, it's fine. This is another thing I like to do. Have a low pass. Okay, so now in parallel, we're gonna put a high pass. So what this is gonna do is basically we have a low pass. Sorry, I don't know how to deal with the camera. Whatever. I have a low pass and I have a high pass, and basically they're creating a notch. But I have full control because I can cross them over. In which case I have the full signal plus basically a bandpass additionally. So it's a nice way to bring tons of movement in the sound and gives you a lot of lot of control basically, versus what a notch would give you. Now the high cut is mostly gonna stay up here, dance around here a bit, but every once in a while it can come down and cross over and create a nice rich sound. Okay, we're cutting a lot of frequencies again, which means we're going to distort again. We use saturation this time. Maybe like a Camel Crusher. It's a balance of distorting, filtering, distorting, filtering. You always take the harmonics away and you bring them back. Take them away, bring them back. introducing movement, artifacts, all sorts of stuff. Every mixing engineer on Earth would probably be shaking their heads right now, but I don't care, because for me, sound design and mixing are two very different categories with very different rules. So mixing has very distinct rules about phases, about what you can and can't do, and why you shouldn't EQ so heavily, etc., etc. But sound design for me doesn't have any rules. It's the product is what's important, and how you get there doesn't matter. And at the end, when you start to mix that into your tune, then you can worry about phase issues and all that stuff. But yeah, that's a kind of a different philosophy of mine. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna revert because I kind of fucked up the high end a bit too much in this case. I might just put the distortion on the low band. That's a bit better. I'm going to start introducing some stereo width. That's okay. Freeze this. And this is approximately, yeah, I think this would be like we talked about 3 stages, right? This would be stage 1 done. So I would probably save this in my library and forget about it. And at one point when I want to make a Neuro bass, I would bring it back. Yeah, so I think we can treat this as done, and we're gonna call this step 1. So yeah, save this into a library, and then another day you want to sound design, you want to make Neuro basses. Now it gets interesting. So you load this into your sampler. I think we did an F, right? So that's 52 in the sample, I believe. Yep. Perfect. And now you can start being creative, because I like to do little chunks. Okay, and now okay, this is an interesting technique with Ableton Sampler. You can put your velocity on the sample offset. And what that means is basically each and every MIDI velocity change will trigger a different part of the sample, which is very handy. And what's great about this is that it's not random, but it's consistent. So the MIDI velocity 100 will always trigger the same part of the sample. So for example, now we're starting here. You can see that. You know what? I probably should have zoomed in a bit, because I'm on a 4K screen and it might be a bit small for people. This helps. Probably should have done that before, but yeah, whatever. Sorry for that. So, what was I doing? Yeah, right. Right now we're triggering this part of the sample, and this way you can just scrub through until you find something that sounds pleasant. So for example, that's pretty cool. Then I usually turn the pitch bend range up, because you need to work a lot with pitching around, basically. And don't be afraid to go into the negatives as well. I know it's going to be sub frequencies, but it doesn't really matter too much. Okay. I like this morph filter that Ableton has. So you have your cutoff, your usual one, but then you can also morph between low cut, high cut, and bandpass. Let's see. Yeah, it sounds okay-ish. Can do better. Okay, I think I'm gonna cheat a bit and take this rack of mine, which I called Instant Neuro Chain. But don't worry, I'm gonna explain it, and it's no sorcery at all. Basically, I have a few macros. So the first up, I'm treating the high end only. The low end goes clean through. I split the band basically. You don't need to do this if you're gonna use a separate sub, but you might wanna. So I have 2 notches here, followed by a saturator, followed by 2 band passes in parallel. So it's basically it's the same that we've been doing. I'm just cheating a bit because it's tiring to do it all over again. And then we have a double notch again, another saturator, another EQ, compressor, flanger, amp. These just add a tiny bit of texture. And then we have a bandpass and a notch in parallel, and then another saturator. So it's the same that we've been doing in step 1. Just more of it because it's not done yet. It needs to be cooked quite heavily until you reach a level where it sounds complex enough. So automating all these. I guess if there's a high enough demand, I might be able to put this device in the description or something. Yeah. Or just write to me if you want it, I guess. Yeah, email me or SoundCloud, whatever. But you might be able to just like copy it, because I've just shown it, and it's not very complicated at all. So. You know, I kind of made a mistake. Not really. Kinda. I'm gonna get rid of the pitch bend on this. Yeah, we're gonna handle it a bit differently. I'm gonna get rid of the pitch bend and prolong the note a bit. And then finish all these automations. Oh boy. By the way, this is why I've broken it down into so many steps, because doing this for each and every bass, like every time you want to have a bass, is a huge pain in the ass because it takes ages. So what I would recommend if you want to do this, as I said before, is build yourself macros, build yourself devices, and break it up into chunks so that yeah, you're faster and more efficient. Because I'm only doing this way for the stream, sorry, for the tutorial. If I wasn't doing that, I'd be done by now and would have tons of great basses that I could use, most likely. Oh, this is gonna sound terrible because I'm really lazy about automating. Usually you need to put quite a lot of care into these, but I'm not doing that right now. Boring. Okay, I'm gonna hit this, bounce this. So now it gets interesting. The reason I didn't do the pitch envelope before is because now we have the modulation hard printed into the file, which means when we now pitch it around in the sampler, the file is gonna play, you know, if you go up the octave, it's gonna play at twice the speed, meaning the modulation is gonna be at twice the speed, and that is the basic, very common, you know, reese feel or reese effect. So this is where it starts to really get interesting, because this is the creative part basically. This would be step 3, where you start to mix it into a song. So you just go like And I'm gonna do the trick again with the velocity. Sample offset 100%. Sure, let's put the notch filter down here as well. Put an LFO on the notch filter. Have some FM going, which you can also modulate, by the way. And yeah, now I can again trigger different parts of the sample simply by changing the velocity. And the real trick, I suppose, is actually just filtering at the end, at the very end. You know, when you want to put it into a song, I do tons of frequency shifter usually, and put off, like I put it on parallel and put like a slight difference in, because it's gonna phase, and the phasing takes very long. Like a cycle takes very long to complete because the offset is very low. So basically you get different variations every time you trigger you know, the sample, which you don't really want in a song because your drop is going to sound different every time. But in terms of sound design, I use it because I then hard print these to audio and have like 50 different tries to choose from. So you can hear it slightly. Each and every one of these is slightly different. Anyway, so this definitely needs some stereo width. So I would do this. Probably. If you want to emphasize certain frequencies, you can have like a overdrive, and you can automate the filter of the overdrive. Okay, and to top it all off, usually I have one low pass and one OTT or something on top, because you want to filter it. And this is basically, you want it to be a sausage, right? Because your dynamics control is the filter, and the OTT afterwards is just because to not make it too boring. I mean, if it was like a chill kind of song, I'd probably not have an OTT and just have the filter. But in a more aggressive song, you do want some of that high end even when the filter is down. So then probably put like an M saturate on top. Slam it into a limiter because I don't care. And this is your bass basically. I don't know if it turned out alright. I suppose so. I think I've done worse. It's a hit or miss technique. Sometimes I don't really think it's hit or miss. Maybe it's about how much effort and patience you're willing to put in. A lot of people think that it's a vocoder that I use. I don't really use a vocoder at all. Not on my basses anyway. I use them on my drums, oddly enough, but I'm not going to get into that. But if I were to use it, I wouldn't use it as a vocoder effect. But sometimes on like dubstep growls or something, I put a vocoder on just to have like add a bit of width actually. You can even put the carrier to itself, which sometimes yields great results. Yeah, and then you can just put this on the original signal. Might add a bit of wetness, but yeah. Yeah, what else? I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, usually when I put it into a song, usually it's gonna have some sort of Foley layer on top. So keep that in mind. That being said, let's see if I can really quickly whip up something somewhat cool. So these are loops of mine, drum loops. Let's see. And then you can just have okay, and then change the filter, because that makes a huge difference in terms of the timbre of the sound, like that final low pass that you have. I'd like to, usually when I do like more ambient neuro fusions, usually the filter is down, and at the end of the bar with a pitch glide it will come up and take the spotlight for a second. It's very in a sense, it's like you know how everything works with like a band, you know, even in electronic music, you know, because it's the vocal's turn and the guitarist's turn, and then you get to the end of the bar, and now it's the drummer's turn where he does the crazy drum fill, and that's his moment of spotlight. And it behaves like kind of similarly. The neuro bass takes the is actually in the background and supports whatever is going on, and then sometimes at the end of the bar it might take the spotlight for a second, and yeah, just like even though we're in electronic music and neurofunk music, which is a niche within a niche, still a lot of the same rules of music apply, so keep that in mind. That didn't work because I put it down. And then yeah, if you were going to do some kind of fusion, you know, or like let me just doodle with the piano, that's probably better. Let me put a, you know what, since we're in Cohen sound territory, you might as well use Rhodes. Let me see. That's a bit loud. Okay. Okay, let's try it. Yeah, not the best thing I've written, but you get the point. You get the point. Put some strings in here, you know, and yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna try labs actually. Yeah. You get the point. It's not great, but yeah, that's basically the whole thing. Then you just put hundreds hours of frustration, suffering, and tears at it. You just throw it at it until it's a finished song that you can release. Yeah. Anyway, this was fun. I hope it helped in some shape or form. And yeah, I guess go watch my stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Kagen Music. And goodbye. Bye bye. Love you. Peace.